Let's have a study session about rare species, habitat loss, and extinction. Here, we are going to discuss about rare species. The type of rarity depends on three attributes of the species in question: size of geographical range, habitat specificity, local population size. Any species for which one or more of these attributes is low demonstrates some form of rarity. Narrow habitat requirements, low population density, and endemism are all different phases of rarity. Many species are rare by virtue of their ecology, while others are rare as a result of human activities. Species with poor dispersal ability or sedentary behavior are likely to become rare as a result of anthropogenic factors. Next is the genetic diversity in rare species. A decline in the number of individuals of a species will result in loss of genetic diversity and inbreeding depression. A minimum viable population is required to maintain genetic variability and to ensure long-term species survival. An MVP of 250 to 500 individuals is accepted as a best estimate for inbreeding avoidance. However, the protection of habitat is the conservation priority, overshadowing concern over genetic diversity. Habitat loss and fragmentation. Numerous habitats such as wetlands, grasslands, and forests have been either drastically reduced in size, modified, or destroyed, usually for agriculture. Habitat degradation results in the decline or loss of species. Habitat fragmentation reduces the habitat area, increases the distance between remaining patches, and favors species found in edge habitats. Species are lost because of overall loss of habitat area and as a result of increasing insularization. Species are lost because of overall loss of habitat area and as a part of increased insularization. Recently isolated patches may initially concern more species than the area can sustain over the long term, and species will be lost from the patch, a process known as relaxation. Extinction is a natural process, although its pace and incidence have been increased through human activity. Historic extinctions are clustered in geological time. Significant extinction occurred in the Permian and Pleistocene. The anthropogenic causes of extinction include hunting, habitat destruction, and artificial species introduction. The IUCN categories species facing considerable risk of being extinct as endangered. Small populations are more likely to become endangered as a direct or indirect result of normal population fluctuations. Demographic and genetic factors interact to cause extinction. The change of population becoming extinct can be predicted by population viability analysis or PEA. Genetic variation, island communities, and colonization conservation strategies are also discussed. So, what is a rare species? Some species are naturally rare and able to flourish in nature in small populations. Rabinos in 1981 identified 7 types of rarity depends on 3 categories: size of geographical range, habitat specificity, local population size. The classification gives 8 possible combinations and emphasizes that species do not have to have small local populations or are highly habitat specific to be rare. All combinations of these characteristics except the large, wide, high combination illustrated by many common species describe different types of rarity. For example, the New Guinea harpy eagle has a large home range and a wide habitat range, yet at low densities. The osprey is widespread but has narrow habitat requirements and it feeds exclusively on fish. Tropical forests are the most diverse of terrestrial communities, holding around 5% of the world's Earth species, but individual population densities tend to be very low. On Barrow, Colorado Island in Central America, 1/3 of the tree species occur at a density of less than 1 individual per hectare. These rare species have very specific habitat preferences, some only occurring in a species which has declined to low numbers will suffer from a loss of genetic diversity, reducing the potential for adaptation to changing environmental conditions and new diseases. It may also experience inbreeding depression and increase the expression of deleterious alleles and reduced offspring fitness. The cheetah is a solitary species with a low population density throughout its range and low overall population size. It appears to have been through a bottleneck and period of inbreeding in the past, which is apparent today in its low genetic variation. This homozygosity is thought to be responsible for the high level of sperm abnormality, high juvenile mortality, and increased susceptibility to diseases such as feline infectious peritonitis. A minimum viable population or MVP is required for the long-term survival of a species to ensure genetic variability is maintained. Many endangered populations are already below the MVP of 250 to 500 individuals accepted as a best estimate for inbreeding avoidance. Detailed and lengthy study is required for the accurate determination of MVP. A 50-year study of bighorn sheep in the southwestern USA was required to establish an MVP of 100. Often, habitat destruction is a real and more immediate threat, and the protection of habitat is a common conservation priority, frequently outshadowing concern over genetic diversity. There are numerous examples of habitat that have been either drastically reduced in area, modified, or destroyed. In the USA, for example, virtually 100% of natural greenlands have been lost since 1492. One of the most exploited terrestrial ecosystems has been wetlands. This once species-rich areas have been settled by humans or drained for agriculture. For example, 90% of wetlands in New Zealand have been lost since European settlement. Temperature native forests have been largely destroyed in Europe. Global forest loss can be measured using satellite technology and has been estimated at 1,70,000 kilometers square per year for the period of 1981 to 1990. A habitat may not be destroyed completely for species to disappear. A site or ecological interaction can be altered such that habitat degradation occurs, which results in the decline of species. The natural regeneration of Brazil nut has been heightened because of the decline of the one bee species able to pollinate it, and of the agouti, a large rodent which buries catches of the nuts. Similarly, in Hawaii, a rare and endemic species of the silverwood is doomed to extinction because its sole insect pollinator has become extinct. Thus, a single species can play a crucial role, having a kind of domino effect in the community that is disproportionate to its abundance. Habitat fragmentation occurs where large tracts of habitat are broken up by agriculture or other development. The effect is to reduce the overall area of the habitat and the size of the patches and to increase the distance between remaining patches. Some species are favored by decade fragmentation. Female meadow voles are more numerous in fragmented habitat because smaller, relatively isolated patches of the same habitat type makes it easier to defend breeding territories. Fragmentation is more usually a detrimental process which has been increased inexorably throughout most of the world. Habitat quality will deteriorate a smaller fragment where there is a large boundary relative to the patch area and less undisturbed interior habitat. Such patches tend to be dominated by edge communities which favor the junction between two habitats. A study of heathland in the Pool Basin, UK, has shown how fragmentation caused by road development results in significant changes in plant species competition, plant performance, and soil nutrient levels. As habitat quality declines, the most susceptible animal species suffer first, particularly those vulnerable to predation when the edge to interior ratio increases. In Amazonian forests, raptors and large fruit and nectar feeding birds are the first to disappear, and these are reliant on food sources found only in the core habitat areas. Some species are more able to survive in small species poor patches than others, and this information can be used to predict which groups are most likely to succumb as habitats become fragmented. The Dorset Heathland is an area of semi-natural scrubland in southern England which developed in freely drained sandy acidic soils following forest clearance. The vegetation is dominated by heather and heaths. Changes in land use have reduced its area to about 450 fragments, totaling just 5% of the original habitat area. A model stimulating the loss of species as fragmentation proceeds demonstrate that species with good powers of dispersal and little change of becoming extinct locally are much more susceptible to fragmentation than poor colonies prone to local extinction. However, above a certain point, the more resilient species are also lost rapidly. Species are lost because of the overall loss of habitat area, but also as a result of increasing insularization. As the distance between patches increase, colonization becomes more difficult, especially for the late mobile species. Islands that have been isolated may have a residual number of species, which is greater than the area can sustain over a long time. Over time, the number of species will fall as extinction outweighs colonization, a process known as relaxation. The principle of relaxation can be used to predict extinction rates for large mammals of East African nature conserves. The average reserve of 4,000 kilometers squared is estimated to lose between 5 and 6 of 48 mammal species in the next 50 years. Extinction is a naturally occurring process which arises through a combination of population characteristics and random environmental factors. Some species have pollution attributes that render them prone to extinction. These are large body size in mammals, small or restricted geographical area, range, habitat specificity, lack of genetic variability, and inability to switch to alternate food sources. Most past extinctions are clustered in geographical time and even seem to show periodicity. A major extinction occurs between the Cretaceous and the Tertiary. It is so distinct in the fossil record that it is used to delineate the boundary between the periods, known as KT boundary, shows the change in depth time and such a fossil selection. One mass extinction occurred in the Permian when 90% of the world's shallow water marine invertebrates become extinct. More recently, the Pleistocene saw the extinction of many mammal species, including the woolly mammoth, mastodon, and giant sloth. Mastodon, and giant sloth. These losses were caused either by the advance and retreat of ice sheets or overexploitation by Pleistocene hunters or a combination of both. This graph shows the percentage extinction of marine mammal genera from the middle of the Permian to the present. Numerous peaks indicate the clusters of extinction. The vertical lines are spaced between 26 million years and appear to coincide with extinction peaks. Cyclical fluctuations in sunspot activity may be the cause of its apparent periodicity in extinctions, reprinted from Evolution Skeleton 1993 with permission. Ranges of branchiopod lamb-shell species over about 50 meters from a KT boundary selection in Denmark. This is a distinct break in the fossil record indicating a mass extinction, and the species of fossil found above the boundary are largely different from those below. The incidences and pace of extinction have been greatly increased as a result of human influences. Humans have caused well over 75% of all extinctions since AD 16. Direct human influences were notoriously responsible for the demise of the dodo, Raphus cucullatus, woolly mammoth, Tasmania wolf, thylacine, and the giant moa, Dinorid maximus, all of which are hunted to extinction. Several species have been brought to the brink of extinction by commercial exploitation. In Kenya and Uganda, between 85% to 89% of all the elephants have been wiped out by poaching. Many whale species are endangered because of the overfishing, and non-target species such as dolphins and seabirds are often also casualties in fishing nets. A large number of species losses occur through habitat destruction. One estimate puts it at over 100 species per day. More subtly, habitat changes through changed management, such as the removal of grazing or through climatic changes, can have a profound effect on particular species. Artificial species introductions have been implicated in cases of extinction and can have particularly devastating effect on native communities. The Fijian coconut moth. Once a serious pest of coconut plantations was driven to extinction by the deliberate introduction of the parasitic fly Bressa remota. The fly then switched to another moths and has caused the extinction of several endemic species. The introduction of rats and other predators has been strongly implicated in the extinction of many of the native bird species of Hawaii and New Zealand, communities which have evolved in the absence of these common predators. The introduction of domestic cats, dogs, goats, and pigs are also caused by many disasters to land ecosystems. Rarity per se does not mean that a species is threatened with extinction. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources (IUCN) recognized four categories of extinction risk. First is the rare species risk category. Rare species having small populations, usually within restricted geographical limits or localized habitat, or widely scattered individuals. They are at the risk of becoming rarer but do not become extinct. Vulnerable species are those which are under threat to actually decreasing in number. Endangered species have only very low population numbers and are in considerable danger of becoming extinct. Extinct species are those that cannot be found in the areas they once inhabited, nor in other likely habitats. A small population is more likely to become extinct than a large one. Firstly, become normal population fluctuations resulting from variations in environmental conditions, as harsh winter, for example, are more likely to decimate the population. And secondly, because inbreeding repression will reduce the population's ability to produce viable offspring. This interaction between demographic and genetic factors acts as an extinction vortex, pulling the population numbers lower. It is not easy to predict the chance of species becoming extinct, as the data on population numbers are often not available. Even in well studied cases, other factors such as environmental stochasticity, catastrophic events, and the effects of inbreeding make population size alone an unreliable predictor of extinction. Population viability analysis, or PVA, is one approach that uses computer modeling to predict a population's chance of extinction. The model incorporates information on the population dynamics of the species, genetic and behavioral factors, and environmental effects, such as the state of habitat, interactions with other species, and human interference. This type of analysis predicts that there is a 25% chance that the eastern bandicoot will be extinct within the next 13 years. This approach also helped the management of endangered species by allowing an estimation of minimum reserve area required to retain a viable population.